coming to the end of Season 7 of ECCB Connects. Join us next week for the final episode when we'll bring you highlights from the 28th OECS ECCB Under-23 Netball Tournament. ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region.
Hi and welcome to this another episode of ECCB Connects. This week we'll be looking at the Eastern Caribbean Payments Council, and I have with me Deputy Governor Trevor Brathwaite, who is also Chairman of the newly reconstituted Eastern Caribbean Payments Council. Deputy Governor, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you, Sherman. Always nice to be here.
Deputy Governor, the Eastern Caribbean Payments Council is one of the tools the ECCB has in fulfillment of Goal 2 of its strategic plan, which is to ensure a strong, diverse, and resilient financial sector. In a nutshell, what is the Payments Council?
So the Payment Council is really a creature of our Monetary Council. The Monetary Council approved its establishment back in 2006. And so the first wave of discussion of the establishment of the Payment Council essentially was to have a view to advise the central bank as well as the Monetary Council on matters relating to payment systems. At the time it was established, the payment system was in its fledgling stages. It is not as sophisticated as it is today. So we would have focused essentially on payments in the payments area, like check payments and the like. And so that was our first stab at looking at the payment system. Large value payments, use of checks for payments. Of course, we issued cash for payments. So that was essentially the first wave of the Eastern Caribbean Payment Council. And then, of course, as you indicated, reconstituted in line with our strategic goals, because a number of developments are occurring in the payments area. We have blockchain technology, fintech generally, you have wallets, you have different electronic types of payments. So there's a lot more sophistication that is being developed in the payment sphere. And so in reconstituting the Payments Council, we gave it a different outlook and reconstituted with persons who have a different an appreciation for what's happening in this particular time.
You mentioned it was first established in 2006. It was recently reconstituted. What happened between 2006 and 2018?
All right. So, as I indicated, the primary focus would have been on check payments. So, our first task was to modernize the processing of checks. Prior to that, we had manual exchange of checks, so that banks will come to a clearinghouse at our agency office. There will be officers from these banks, and they will sit across a table and exchange checks that have been presented to them from another bank. And so there was this physical exchange of checks, and so that settlement will take place maybe 2, 3, even sometimes 4 days later. It would have been even more of a challenge across the currency union, where checks will have to come back to the originating bank across. So let's say a check was in St. Lucia and the account was in St. Kitts. They had to physically do this over the space. So the first challenge for the Payment Council was to see how we can make this more efficient. And therefore, we had discussions on establishing an electronic method of exchanging checks. So the Payment Council at the time oversaw the creation of the Payment Systems Act, the amendments to the Bills of Exchange Act to facilitate electronic transactions. And then we, in consultation and support with our member banks, we established the ACH company. And our first work output for that company was the automated clearinghouse, where checks are scanned and exchanged electronically. And of course, recently we launched electronic funds transfer, which enables funds to be transferred between banks and between countries almost on the same day basis.
So it's much easier now for citizens and the residents to conduct business.
Precisely.
Okay. But with respect to the Payments Council and its history, it seemed to, because it has been reconstituted in June, and it seems like, so there was a period of sort of dormancy. What was responsible for that?
Along came 2008 and 2009, where we had the banking crisis, and a fair amount of focus had to be paid attention to the banking crises that developed in our region. And a lot of focus, attention, and resources of the central bank had to be placed to see how we can resolve these matters. So as you remember, we had a banking crisis in Antigua and Barbuda. We had one followed in Angola. And so a considerable amount of resources had to be spent in terms of looking at how to rectify the particular situation.
You mentioned earlier that the new council has, professionals who are experts in the area of what's happening now in terms of development in the payments. Who are they?
All right, so we have tried to maintain a connection with our commercial banks. And so we've solicited the help of the OECS Bank Association, or the ECCU Bankers Association rather. And so the president and the secretary of that association are members of the Payment Council. We also reached out to the Caribbean Association of Banks because we wanted to get a wider appreciation of what our banks, not only in the ECCU, would like, but also in the wider CARICOM. So we reached out to the Caribbean Association of Banks, and so they have, there's a nominee from the Caribbean Association of Banks on the Payment Council. We have maintained our connection with the Eastern Caribbean Securities ECSRC because the ECSRC itself provides a relationship with banks and investors. So we want to make sure we maintain that connection. And the new twist, if you will, to the PC is the nomination of a telecommunications expert. So we've sought the expertise of Mr. Emmett Charles, who at one time used to be the managing director of ECTEL. And so he has a wealth of experience on the use of telecommunications. So when we talk about mobile banking, we talk about using your cell phone to do transactions. We think that Mr. Charles is well placed to advise the Payment Council because of his expertise.
Because really, that's the way
things are going. Yeah, the use of internet technology and all of these things. We thought it would be useful to have Mr. Charles sitting on the council. And I think already we've seen that at our first meeting, the input from that particular discipline is going to be very important.
Okay. You just mentioned your first meeting. You had your first meeting on the 28th of June. What's the focus of this reconstituted Eastern Caribbean Payments Council? What will be your areas of focus?
So we want to continue to have a look at the payment system generally. As I indicated previously, there are new developments, emerging developments that are on the cusp of being implemented by private sector interests. And as you know, the central bank has a responsibility for the oversight of the payment system. We don't want to create a situation where we are diminishing persons' ability to be innovative, but we need to make sure as the regulator, the supervisor of the payment system, that things go according to plan and that there are legislative bases for making sure that these developments are controlled and that they are regulated adequately and that we will have the appropriate oversight. So we are looking at cashless society, how these developments will occur, the substitution of cash for electronic transactions, for internet type transactions, looking at blockchain technology. All of these things are emerging developments. You would have heard about our press release on Bitcoin, all right? Not stifling innovation, but making sure that innovation takes place within an environment where persons who use those facilities are assured that they are not going to be any things amiss, that they're going to lose their money, or they're going to lose, face, so to speak, from participating in those transactions.
Did you, just going back to an issue you raised with respect to settlement of checks, the central bank issued an advisory earlier this year with respect to the time for settling of checks. However, some customers have been complaining that they go to the banks and it's still an extended period. They're having difficulties. What's the central bank's response?
So we had tried to encourage our commercial banks on a T+1 settlement. So like if you deposited a check today, tomorrow you will have your funds. That is the standard that we have encouraged our commercial banks to follow. Now, some commercial banks do have technological issues that they have to fix in order to provide the standard of T+1. So that is why in some cases, when customers of different banks deposit a check, it may take a little longer, right? Now, it's more important to make sure that this assurance can happen across the space. So if I deposit a check in Grenada, right, and my bank account is in St. Kitts, then I should get T+1 as well. So that's the kind of transaction standard that we want to promote. The ACH background, the backbone for the ACH, allows that kind of transaction to occur. But what has to happen is that the interface in the bank that you go to has to be modernized in order to do that. And we know that some banks, all of our banks, are making concerted efforts to raise the investment to allow these things to occur within the T+1 time frame. But guess what? With EFT, you can get settlement same day, right? So our thinking is, persons still want to use checks, and eventually, I think over time, persons will see the benefits of using the EFT platform, and then will be able to get transactions settled much more quickly. In Aruba, for instance, checks have been banned. Okay? Everything is done electronically. So if they can do it there, why not us? It will take a little bit more time because Aruba is one country. We're talking about 8 countries with, as I indicated, a different appreciation for the use of cash. So we have to educate our public. We have to say to our banks, hey, we need to change. We need to give them the encouragement to do so that we can encourage business persons, individuals, to use the technology that is developing. So the next step is to use the technology for the advantage of customers.
So it's really a matter of time because the infrastructure is in place. All the measures, the arrangements are in place. It's just for the banks to really come on board.
That's
and
right.
Of course, some of them are more advanced than
That's
others.
right.
So for the public, it's really a matter of time and maybe a little patience.
A little patience. I mean, we are in innovative area as far as that is concerned. And these things take a little time.
We are a cash-heavy society. People like to pull out their wallets, pull out their money, and then you also mentioned, going cashless and all of these electronic payments and technology. So now conducting business is about moving towards technology. And of course, it's about change, and people in our society might be timid about all of these inventions and innovations in terms of spending, being worried. What sort of reassurance you have for the citizens and residents of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union?
Our role is to make sure that our public is comforted by the fact that there's someone or an institution who has oversight of all of these new innovations. With anything new, there's going to be some trepidation. In some of our societies in the ECCU, we're still very cash-centric. There are others where persons have moved away from cash, using debit and credit cards, etc. But we are in this transitionary phase, and what we don't want to happen is that all of these things overtake us to the point that later on we are regretting the fact that we have not been innovative, we have not been able to have the proper oversight, perhaps legislation put in place, all of these checks and balances that will assure citizens that, hey, you can participate in these new payment arrangements, right, with some assurance that the central bank has oversight of these matters, just as people are very comfortable with our banking system. They know that when they get up in the morning, they can go to their ATM, they can go into the banking hall, they can withdraw their money, and the exchange rate is fixed. They can do their transactions because the central bank is in a position to assure the public that we have this, right? So we want to assure the public as well, for the new innovative things that are coming, we have this.
Deputy Governor, thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Thank you.
We are coming to the end of Season 7 of ECCB Connects. Join us next week for the final episode, when we'll bring you highlights from the 28th OECS ECCB Under-23 Netball Tournament. ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region.
Here's where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Join us again next week when we'll bring you the final episode of Season 7. See you then.